Hey everybody, this video is for two groups of people. One, for those people who were in class and need a review on this topic, and those who were not here because of the weather. This video is for you. This video is going to focus on the remodeling of bone. We talk about bone being a very dynamic material. Try to get past the perception that bone are these sticks in our arms and legs, and that they don't do anything. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's actually a very, very dynamic material. And we know that bone grows. We talked about epiphyseal and appositional growth. But bone also remodels. That is, it changes, it adapts, it responds to stresses, and it responds to signals. So let's look at those signals and stresses here. One way that bone remodels is due to something called mechanical stress. If you think about this stress up here, this force, if you were to apply this force to the bone, there's going to be a little bit of force on this side, but more force is on that side. And for the bone to really be maximally best architecturally equipped to handle future stress, it's going to have to add bone mass on this side. So you see over here, we've added this new bone here, and we've taken away bone on that side, and now we have a bone that's better equipped to handle stress in the future, both sides equally. This is called Wolff's Law. Wolff's Law says that bone density increases where it is most stressed. Bone density increases where it's most stressed. So this is a mechanical stress mechanism, one way that bone remodels. So how does it work? Well, we actually don't entirely know, but here is probably what's going on. On the stressed side of bone, we have the osteocytes are probably signaling each other through electrical signals. Remember that we have calcium and potassium as the major ions in bone. It's likely happening that when bone is stressed, we start to send these electrical signals. These ions begin to move in response to the stress. That stimulates the osteocytes to produce what? To produce more matrix. So that's where the bone gets thicker on the side of the osteocytes being more active. And of course, on the side opposite over here, the osteocytes are not being very active, but osteoclasts still are. So bone is being removed from this side, but you're adding bone here because of the activity of the osteoblast. So again, to recap, Wolff's Law says that one way that we're going to increase bone mass is through this mechanical stressing of bone. We believe it works through an electrical signaling mechanism, but we're not sure. Okay, so that's one way. And just kind of give you some features of this then. If you consider the process of stress, stress may actually result in some bad bone development, as you see here. Here's a bone spur. You have an extra bit of growth, kind of this section here, that we associate with stress. This person's put a lot of repeated stress on their heels, on the calcaneal bone, and as a result, we've stimulated the osteoblasts and the osteocytes in this area to create extra bone mass, and now we have a bone spur. Now we have this extra bit of bone. Now it's hard to see the soft tissue here, but the soft tissue that would run through here is not going to catch on that bone, and we're going to have some pain as a result of that bone spur. So wherever bone gets stimulated to grow through stress, then you're going to produce extra bone growth. And we see this in bone spurs in our joints as well. So that's one feature of it, but it also, of course, works the other way. If you have bone that's not being stressed, and stressed means walking on it, using gravity on it. If you have somebody who's bedridden, like this woman here, then she's not going to have much stress on her bones. The osteoblasts are not going to be stimulated, so she's not going to build new bone. Osteoclasts are still going to be working to remodel her bone, so she'll be losing bone mass, but not producing new bone mass because she's not stressing her bone to do it. So people who are bedridden, we mentioned in class about astronauts, astronauts, when they come back from space, have weakened bone mass, lost bone mass, because there's no stress, no gravitational stress in space to put stress their skeleton. So they tend to be rather weak when they get back to Earth. So that's mechanism one, which is mechanical stress can affect bone remodeling. The other mechanism that's a little more involved, perhaps, is kind of hard to see in my menu here, is hormones. Hormones can actually change the dynamic, if you will, of bone mass. And the main hormone that does that is this one here, PTH. PTH, parathyroid hormone, is produced in the parathyroid gland. And the parathyroid hormone is going to be a principal hormone involved in regulating blood serum calcium levels. You should have at all times roughly about 1.5 grams of calcium in your bloodstream. And you're going to think that's not very much, but it's critical that you have that. Calcium is involved in everything from clotting your blood to muscle contractions to nervous system signaling to your heart functioning. So you have to have, not optional, you have to have a sufficient amount of calcium in your bloodstream to stay alive. So this mechanism of hormones regulating calcium and remodeling is critical. So how does PTH work? It has three essential mechanisms, and you see them listed here. So we'll start with this one. PTH actually promotes the release of calcium from the bone because it will stimulate the production of osteoclasts. So let's say that your serum blood calcium level is a little bit low. Let's say instead of 1.5, it's 1.46. Well, that's going to trigger PTH because the parathyroid is monitoring your calcium levels. It goes, that's not enough. So it stimulates the osteoclast to start degrading the bone and releasing that calcium into your bloodstream. This is a positive thing, right? Yeah. PTH needs to make sure calcium is available, so it's going to remove it from bone. Now, before you get upset and say, wait, I don't want to remove it from bone, remember that calcium is stored in bone. In fact, 99% of all of our body's calcium is in bone, and it's okay. Bone is a bank. It's a storage site for calcium, and the bone is not going to fall apart if we remove a little calcium from it. It will be okay. So mechanism one is that we're going to remove calcium from the bone into the blood by the action of PTH. That's action one. Action two is that PTH is going to cause the kidneys to reabsorb calcium from the urine. That's a little strange statement. Inside the kidneys, we have a bunch of tubes, and fluid is moving through it. Some of the fluid is going to eventually be lost as urine. But as the fluid moves through these tubes, we have a chance to grab stuff out if we want to keep it. And these are called nephrons. As the nephrons are processing the urine to be, PTH can tell those nephrons, hey, don't throw out the calcium, save it. And so that calcium goes back into the bloodstream, and there's another mechanism for saving calcium. The third way that PTH helps with calcium levels in the blood is it promotes the active vitamin D formation. Vitamin, as we said before, with the integumentary system, we make the precursors to vitamin D, and that's important for absorbing calcium. PTH can make that process happen too. So it promotes the production of vitamin D. Vitamin D is very helpful as we eat meals and as food passes through our intestines. Rather than the calcium being lost as feces in the feces, PTH says make vitamin D. Vitamin D helps us absorb calcium, goes into our bloodstream, and once again, that's a win. We have three different ways we have ensured that we have calcium entering the bloodstream via either, but the mechanisms including, again, just to summarize, from the bone, from the urine, and from the food. So notice there, it's really important, what was not the goal of the hormonal system. It was not to put calcium onto the bone. It was not to store it there. It was to make sure our blood serum levels are appropriate. Now, if we have extra calcium in the bloodstream, that's okay. We can have the osteoblast remove it. Down here you see calcitonin. Calcitonin is another hormone, and what calcitonin does, it slightly inhibits the osteoclast from being so active. And the osteoblasts that are working can take some of the calcium and put it to the bone and make the bone bigger. So calcitonin is a minor hormone here. PTH is the major hormone. But all of this, again, is critical to make sure that we have the appropriate level of calcium in our bloodstream at all times. So just to finish up, this is what's called a calcium budget. And it looks pretty complicated here. What I want you to focus on is this. Normally, bone formation and bone resorption of calcium is going to be about the same. As osteoclasts and osteoblasts are working, we're going to have usually, for most people, without any kind of medical issues or no osteoporosis, for example, we're going to be fine in that we're going to maintain adequate levels of calcium in our bone because of this budget. You see, again, we consume calcium in our diet. We absorb, secrete, we do pee out, we do poop out some calcium. But for the most part, our bone is going to be relatively stable because the formation and the resorption are about the same. Where people have issues with not consuming enough calcium, or they have genetic issues where they don't use calcium, or other concerns like osteoporosis, then this budget obviously is not quite correct. Okay, that's just a bit of the recap and review of calcium metabolism and calcium homeostasis as it relates to bone remodeling. Hope that helps. Thanks.